My business partner, Jake, defrauded me out of $500,000. What he learned from our 20-year friendship was that I always had backup plans. But what he didn't know was that I understood his character perfectly. When he thought he had taken control of the company, he had actually walked into my trap. My name is Marcus Rivera. I'm 43 years old, and I just executed the most elaborate business revenge in corporate partnership history. But what Jake Henderson didn't understand was that stealing from someone who had known you for 2 decades wasn't just betrayal. It was strategic suicide, because true friends know exactly how to destroy each other. Standing in the bankruptcy court 18 months after Jake had thought he'd stolen my company, watching him lose everything he'd tried to take from me while I acquired his assets for pennies on the dollar, I felt the deep satisfaction of a trap that had taken 20 years of friendship to set and 18 months to spring perfectly. But according to Jake's version of our partnership, he had been saving the business from Marcus's poor decision-making. The company that had been stolen and then reclaimed was Rivera-Henderson Technologies, a software development firm that Jake and I had built from nothing into a $3.2 million annual revenue business over 15 years of partnership. To understand how Jake had been able to exploit our friendship to defraud me out of $500,000, and how I had been able to use my knowledge of his character to destroy him completely, I need to explain the 20-year relationship that had made both his betrayal and my revenge possible. Jake Henderson and I had met in 1983 during our freshman year at State University, where we'd been roommates in the engineering dormitory. Despite coming from completely different backgrounds, I was from a working-class Mexican-American family. Jake was from affluent white suburbia. We'd become close friends. "You're the hardest working person I've ever met," Jake had told me during our sophomore year, when I'd been working 2 part-time jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA in computer science. "I have to work hard," I'd replied. "My family sacrificed everything to send me to college. I can't let them down. That's what I admire about you, Marcus. You never give up, and you always have a plan." Jake's observation about my planning nature had been accurate. Even in college, I'd been the type of person who prepared for multiple scenarios and always had contingency strategies for important situations. Marcus thinks 5 moves ahead. Jake had often joked to our friends. He's like a chess master, always planning his next strategy. What Jake had found admirable in college would later become the foundation of his destruction. But he'd never understood that my strategic thinking applied to personal relationships as much as business planning. After graduation, Jake and I had taken different career paths initially. I'd gone to work for a large software company to gain experience and save money, while Jake had joined his father's investment firm to learn about finance and business development. "We should start our own company someday," Jake had suggested. During one of our regular monthly dinners in 1995, "You understand technology, I understand business. We'd make a great team." "I've been thinking the same thing," I'd replied. "I've been saving money and learning about software development trends. When the right opportunity comes, we should go for it." The opportunity had arrived in 1998 when the dot-com boom was creating demand for custom software solutions. Jake and I had pooled our savings, $50,000 each, and had launched Rivera-Henderson Technologies from Jake's garage. "This is going to be amazing," Jake had said on the day we'd signed our partnership agreement. "Best friends building a business together. What could be better? As long as we're always honest with each other, we can accomplish anything," I'd replied, not realizing that Jake's definition of honesty would prove to be more flexible than mine. The first 10 years of our partnership had been genuinely successful and collaborative. We'd grown the business from 2-person startup to a 30-employee company, had developed innovative software solutions, and had built a strong reputation in the regional market. Marcus handles the technical development. I handle the business side, Jake had often explained to clients. We complement each other perfectly. Our division of responsibilities had seemed natural and effective. I'd focused on software architecture, team management, and client technical requirements, while Jake had managed sales, marketing, and financial operations. I trust Jake completely with the business side. I'd told my wife during one of our conversations about the company's growth. He's my best friend, and he's always been straight with me about everything. But what I hadn't realized was that Jake's business side, management, had gradually evolved into complete financial control, and that his access to company accounts had created opportunities for the kind of theft that would have been impossible in a more transparent partnership structure. The first signs of trouble had emerged around 2010, when I'd begun noticing discrepancies between our reported profits and the actual cash flow available for business operations and partner distributions. Our margins seemed lower than they should be. I'd mentioned to Jake during one of our quarterly reviews, we're billing more hours, but we're not seeing proportional increases in available cash. That's because we're investing more heavily in infrastructure and business development, Jake had explained. Those investments will pay off in the long term, but they're reducing our short-term cash flow. Can you show me the breakdown of those investments? I'll put together a detailed report for our next meeting. The important thing is that we're positioning the company for future growth. Jake's reports had always been comprehensive and professional looking, but they'd been summaries rather than detailed financial records, and I trusted him enough not to demand access to the underlying account information. The second warning sign had been Jake's increasing resistance to my suggestions about business strategy and his subtle implications that I should focus on technical matters while leaving business decisions to him. Marcus, you're a brilliant technical mind, but business strategy requires a different skill set, Jake had said when I'd suggested we needed better financial transparency between partners. I understand that, but I think I should have more visibility into our financial planning. You do have visibility. I provide you with comprehensive reports every quarter. I mean direct access to our accounts and financial records. That would just create confusion and duplicate work. Trust me to handle the business side and focus on what you do best, the technical development. Jake's request that I trust him had seemed reasonable from a 20-year friend, and I'd been busy enough with the technical aspects of our growing business that I'd been willing to let him maintain primary control over financial operations. The third warning sign had been Jake's lifestyle improvements and his increasing focus on personal wealth accumulation that seemed inconsistent with our company's reported profitability. Nice car, I'd commented when Jake had arrived at the office in a new BMW M5 in 2012. I got a great deal on it. He'd replied, sometimes you have to invest in looking successful to attract better clients. How much did it cost? Don't worry about it. It's a business expense, and it'll pay for itself through improved client perception. Jake's expensive purchases, the car, a vacation home, premium office renovations, had all been justified as business investments. But I'd begun to wonder how our company was generating enough surplus cash to fund Jake's increasingly luxurious lifestyle. The discovery that had changed everything had occurred in 2013, purely by accident, when I'd received a piece of mail addressed to Jake from a bank I didn't recognize. What's this account with Cayman International Bank? I'd asked Jake, showing him the statement that had been delivered to our office by mistake. Oh, that's just a business account I opened for some international client payments, he'd replied. Casually, some of our larger clients prefer to use offshore banking for their software licensing fees. Why didn't you mention it during our financial reviews? Because it's just a pass-through account. Money comes in from international clients and gets transferred to our main accounts. It's not really part of our core business operations. Jake's explanation had seemed plausible, but something about his reaction had made me suspicious enough to begin paying closer attention to our business financial activities. The investigation I had begun quietly conducting over the following 18 months had revealed the scope of Jake's betrayal and the systematic methods he'd been using to steal from our partnership while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business management, working with a forensic accountant I'd hired secretly and paid for with personal funds. I had discovered that Jake had been embezzling approximately $200,000 annually from Rivera-Henderson Technologies through a sophisticated scheme involving fake vendors, inflated expenses, and offshore accounts. Your partner has created an elaborate system for siphoning money from your business, forensic accountant Lisa Chun had explained after reviewing the evidence I'd collected. He's been submitting invoices from companies that don't exist, inflating legitimate business expenses, and transferring the excess funds to accounts he controls personally. How long has this been going on? Based on the patterns we could identify, at least 5 years. The total amount stolen appears to exceed $750,000. How has he hidden this from me? Because he controls all the financial reporting and accounting systems. He's been manipulating the books to show legitimate business expenses while actually stealing the money for personal use. The evidence Chun had helped me compile included bank records, falsified invoices, documentation of shell companies Jake had created, and financial analysis showing the systematic diversion of partnership assets to Jake's personal accounts. But the most shocking discovery hadn't been the amount of money Jake had stolen. It had been the evidence that he'd been planning to steal my share of the entire company and force me out of the business we'd built together. Your partner has been consulting with attorneys about partnership dissolution and business acquisition. Private investigator David Martinez had told me after completing additional research I'd commissioned. He's been developing a strategy to buy out your partnership interest at below market value while concealing the company's true financial position. What do you mean? He's been artificially depressing the company's apparent profitability by inflating expenses and hiding revenue. If he forced a partnership dissolution, the business would be valued based on his manipulated financial records rather than its actual earning potential. The evidence Martinez had uncovered included email communications between Jake and his attorney discussing strategies for forcing me out of the partnership, financial projections showing the company's true value versus Jake's manipulated reports, and documentation of Jake's plan to acquire full ownership of Rivera-Henderson Technologies for a fraction of its actual worth. However, what Jake hadn't anticipated was that 20 years of friendship had taught me exactly how his mind worked, and that I'd been preparing for the possibility of partnership betrayal since the day we'd started the business. Jake always gets greedy when he thinks he has an advantage, I'd explained to my attorney during our strategy session. His weakness is that he can't resist taking more than he's entitled to, even when he's already winning. How does that help? You? Because I'm going to give him an opportunity to steal even more money in a way that will expose his entire criminal operation and destroy him completely. The trap I had designed had been based on 20 years of understanding Jake's psychological patterns and his inability to resist opportunities for personal enrichment, even when those opportunities carried significant risks. Working with my attorney and forensic accountant, I had created a fake business opportunity that would appear to offer Jake the chance to steal an additional $500,000 from partnership funds while positioning himself to take complete control of the company. We're going to make Jake think he can steal a lot more money while eliminating me as a partner, I'd explained to my wife. When he takes the bait, he'll commit crimes that are so obvious that even he won't be able to explain them away. The bait had been a fictional emergency client project that required a substantial upfront investment from partnership funds, with the promise of a massive payoff that would dwarf our previous contracts. Marcus, I've been contacted by a consortium of European companies that need a comprehensive software solution developed on an aggressive timeline. Jake had told me during our meeting in March 2014, they're offering $2.8 million for a project. That should take us about 8 months to complete. That's almost our entire annual revenue for a single project. What's the catch? They need us to fund the initial development costs up front, about $500,000 for specialized software licenses, hardware, and contractor payments. But they'll reimburse everything plus the full project fee upon delivery. That's unusual. Why? Can't they provide the upfront funding? European bureaucracy and banking regulations. It's easier for them to reimburse a completed project than to fund development costs across international borders. Jake's explanation had been plausible enough that I might have believed it if I hadn't known it was part of his plan to steal an additional $500,000 from our partnership. I think we should be cautious about such a large upfront investment, I'd said, playing my role in the trap we were setting. Marcus, this is the kind of opportunity that could set us up for life. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks to achieve major success. I suppose you're right. If you think it's worth the risk, I'll trust your business judgment. My agreement to Jake's fraudulent project had been the moment he'd committed the crime that would ultimately destroy him, because every dollar he stole from the fake European contract would be documented and traceable. Over the following 6 months, Jake had systematically transferred $487,000 from partnership accounts to fund his fictional project, creating a paper trail of theft that even the most incompetent prosecutor could follow. The European project is progressing well, Jake had reported during our monthly meetings. We're on schedule and on budget. When do we expect the reimbursement payment? They've confirmed that payment will be processed upon final delivery, which should be in about 2 months. Jake's fictional project updates had been professional and convincing, but I'd known that every report was documenting his ongoing embezzlement of partnership assets. The confrontation I'd been planning for over a year had finally arrived in September 2014, when Jake had announced that the European project had been canceled and that the upfront investment had been lost. I have bad news about the European contract, Jake had told me during what he thought would be a routine business meeting. The client consortium has dissolved due to regulatory changes, and they're unable to proceed with the project. What does that mean for our upfront investment? Unfortunately, the money we invested in development costs is unrecoverable. This is a significant loss for the partnership. Jake, we need to discuss something important. I know the European project never existed. The expression on Jake's face had been identical to his reaction when we'd been caught cheating on exams in college. A mixture of shock, fear, and desperate calculation about how to minimize consequences. What are you talking about? I mean, that I've been documenting your embezzlement for 18 months, and I have comprehensive evidence of every dollar you've stolen from our partnership. Jake had gone completely silent, realizing that his 20-year deception had been exposed. The legal proceedings that had followed had been swift and devastating for Jake. The evidence I'd accumulated had been overwhelming, and his attorney had been unable to provide any legitimate explanation for his criminal activities. Mr. Henderson, you stand accused of embezzling over $750,000 from your business partnership, Judge Patricia Williams had said during our first hearing. How do you respond to these allegations? Your Honor, there have been some misunderstandings about business expenses and investment strategies, Jake had replied weakly. Misunderstandings that resulted in $750,000 being transferred to your personal accounts? The financial records are complex, and some transactions may appear irregular when taken out of context. Mr. Henderson, the evidence shows systematic theft over a 5-year period, including the creation of fraudulent companies and fake business expenses. This is not a misunderstanding. Jake's conviction had been inevitable given the evidence, but the sentence had been more severe than even I had expected. He'd been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $1.2 million in restitution and legal fees. Mr. Henderson, your betrayal of a 20-year friendship and business partnership represents a particularly cruel form of white-collar crime, Judge Williams had stated during sentencing. You exploited personal trust to commit systematic theft, and your sentence reflects the serious nature of these crimes. Additionally, Jake had been forced to forfeit his partnership interest in Rivera-Henderson Technologies. His personal assets had been seized to pay restitution, and he'd been banned from serving as a corporate officer in any business. But the most satisfying aspect of Jake's destruction hadn't been his prison sentence. It had been his realization that his 20-year friendship with me had been the very weapon I'd used to destroy him. How long have you been planning this? Jake had asked me after the sentencing. Since college, I'd replied. You always said I was a strategic thinker who planned ahead. I've been preparing for the possibility that you might betray our partnership since the day we started the business. You've been setting me up for 20 years? I've been protecting myself from someone whose character I understood perfectly. You always get greedy, Jake. I just gave you an opportunity to be greedy enough to destroy yourself. I thought we were friends. We were friends. But you decided that stealing from me was more important than our friendship. I decided that justice was more important than protecting someone who had betrayed me. The business recovery had been remarkably successful. With Jake's criminal activities exposed and his partnership interest forfeited, I'd been able to acquire full ownership of Rivera-Henderson Technologies at a court-ordered valuation that reflected its actual profitability rather than Jake's manipulated financial reports. It's ironic that Jake's attempt to steal your company actually made you wealthier, my attorney had observed while reviewing the asset transfer documents. 2 years after Jake's conviction, Rivera-Henderson Technologies was generating $4.1 million in annual revenue, minus 28% higher than during our partnership, because I was no longer losing $200,000 annually to Jake's embezzlement. Sometimes the best revenge is just stopping someone from robbing you, I had reflected while reviewing our financial performance. The business partner, who had thought he could exploit 20 years of friendship to steal my life's work, had learned that true friendship includes understanding someone well enough to predict exactly how they'll betray you. Sometimes the people who think they know you well enough to deceive you discover that you know them well enough to destroy them. And sometimes the most elaborate betrayals fail because they're planned by people who underestimate the strategic thinking of someone who has been preparing for their treachery for decades.